Seconds. Good evening, everyone. I'll just leave it a few seconds for a few more people to join. But good news, you are in the right place. Of everything you could be doing this evening, we're very excited to share what's going to be a couple of great talks from Alex Barker and Ben Keene from Be More Pirate and Rebel Book Club. And it's all about finding your entrepreneurial purpose and being more pirate. So as I said, just wait a few seconds for a few more people to join, and then I'll start on a short intro, and then I'll invite Alex and Ben to the stage and we'll get started. But thank you all very much for being here. And I hope you have a notepad and a pen because you'll be wanting to take plenty of notes. Okay, so I'm going to get started. So as I said, you're all very welcome to come here. You are in for a right treat this evening. It's all about finding your entrepreneurial purpose and being more pirate. And we're going to hear some incredible stories and answers from Alex Barker and Ben Keene. So to start off with, what is a good entrepreneur? For us at City Ventures and Better Space, a good entrepreneur is one that balances people, planet, and profit, or has social and environmental impact at their core. So I'll get back to Alex and Ben shortly, but I'll just guide you through what's happening with the rest of the Good Entrepreneur Festival. So you'll see each week, including this evening, for the next 4 weeks, there is different talks with incredible speakers. So next week we'll have fundraising, funding and investment for your social enterprise. Then we'll have creating value and measuring social impact. And then we'll have a few great stories from very early stage social enterprises and social impact businesses, along with the award ceremony for Pitch for Good. So if you enjoy tonight, and I'm sure you will, be sure to sign up to the future events. Who is bringing you tonight? Good question, I hear you ask. So City University of London is home to 20,000 students across 5 schools, from the business school to the law school. In 2019, it won the award for the greenest university in London, which we're very proud of. And its entrepreneurial arm is called City Ventures. So if you are a City student or alumni, be sure to follow at City Uni Ventures on Instagram or at City Ventures on LinkedIn. And also, if you're a student and alumni in City, there's a Pitch for Good competition running at the moment where you can win a prize pot of £2,000. So be sure to take a screenshot. If you have a social impact idea, you can enter and be in a to win. Who am I? I'm Samuel Lahan, and I'm the project manager on a project called Better Space, which I'll explain a little bit more shortly. I'm also co-founder of a couple of creative startups, one being MYO, and I'm in the creative studio at the moment, and Creative Jungle. And they're all about helping people get creative, and we help tens of thousands of people every year get creative. And I've also worked in a couple of not-for-profits. So Better Space, who will Better Space be home to? So it will be, and it's not launched yet, a co-working space for social impact and environmental impact businesses, change makers, social entrepreneurs, everyone that wants to make the world a better place. There'll be 80+ desks. We hope to have the next generation of Patagonia, Olio, Us2, Honest Mobile, all these great companies that are making waves and doing good and doing business a bit differently. It will launch in May 2021, and it'll be in Islington, and it's a partnership between City University and Islington Council. So be sure to follow at Better Space London if you're an early stage social impact business or change maker or social entrepreneur. We'd love to have you in the space when it opens in Islington in a couple of months. Back to this evening. So what I'd like to do now is invite Alex and Ben to the stage, our very esteemed speakers for the evening, where we're talking about finding your entrepreneurial purpose and being more pirate. So big welcome to you both, and thank you for listening to that introduction. One thing that I'd like to ask everybody is to post in the Q&A box just where you're watching from, if you don't mind. And also, if you're working on any particular projects or social impact businesses, we'd love to hear. So if you could pop that in. I don't think the chat function is working. So if you could pop it in the Q&A, that would be great. What's going to happen now is Alex is going to do a bit of a presentation when I unshare the screen and tell her incredible story about Be More Pirate and get you all fired up. And then that'll be followed by a little bit of a Q&A between myself and Ben, and there'll be lots of time for Q&A at the end for Alex and Ben. So make sure any questions also, just feel free to pop them in. I'm just going to have one quick scan of my notes to make sure I haven't missed anything. I haven't. So without further ado, I am going to stop sharing the screen and I'll let Alex share the slides, and then I'll be back in about 15, 20 minutes to have a bit of a chat with Ben. Thank you all for listening.
Great, thank you. So my incredible journey that I'm going to share with you in 15 minutes and excuse the clunky beginning where I have not got my screen on present properly. So that's life, that's tech after a whole year of Zoom. So yes, Be More Pirate. I guess I'm going to start as close to the beginning as we've got time for tonight, which is the point at which I came across a really, really unusual job advertisement for a right-hand pirate. I had never seen anything quite like that before. And it was pretty much accompanied by 2 lines. I am looking for somebody to help me build some social impact out of my book, Be More Pirate, and stop me from disappearing up my own arse. That was the job description that accompanied Sam's advert. And I thought, okay, you've definitely got my attention. So I read back Be More Pirate cover to cover, and this was sort of the end of 2018. And to be honest with you, when I'd finished reading it, I had quite a lot of skepticism. I was not drawn in by this promise of being able to take on the world and win. I thought this is a really, really good kind of bright branding, great marketing, but I've heard the promise of change too often to really believe it. Nevertheless, I'd never quite seen it presented in this way before. So I decided to apply for the job and went back to London to meet Sam. And I was pretty ballsy when I turned up and said, you know, I like the idea, but is this book more style over substance? And he just said, well, you tell me. That's what I'm trying to find out. He explained that he'd received, since the book had been published, he'd received messages from people all over the world talking about the kind of rebellions that they were starting, the rules that they were breaking in work, and how the book had really kind of prompted them to act. And I don't know, that sounded like an interesting challenge to me. I was curious to know, you know, what did we mean by the rules that needed breaking? What kind of rewrites were they doing? And why was this book seemingly helping people to take more action than others, or all the books about social change out there? So I took the job. And I never in a million years imagined that 2 years on, we'd have a second book, which documents all the amazing stories of all those people who have taken up arms and become kind of modern pirates. Turns out there really was a lot of substance to it. So that's the journey that we've been on. So I'm going to tell you a little bit today about what it really means to how to be more pirate. Like that was my job, that was my mission, and this is a bit of the story. The first, interestingly, the first line that was repeated back to me most often out of Be More Pirate was this one: no one is coming to save you. It's going to get worse before it gets better. And it feels more true than ever today. But really, it captures this feeling of both kind of a deep fear and simultaneous liberation that comes when you can no longer put any faith in the external institutions and structures and leadership. When you realize that there's a total vacuum of imagination at the kind of highest levels of leadership, and really, if we're going to create real change, it's going to be up to us. No one is coming to save the day. And never has this been more true than this year. The second thing that was really, really powerful was actually the story of the pirates, you know, accompanied with this idea that no one is coming to save you. Stepping into the avatar of a pirate really helped people to feel a sense of courage and empowerment that they hadn't been able to access before. It became this kind of shared secret language for people to say, like, I'm being pirate. strangely more powerful than rebel, I'd say, because being a pirate is about much more than just rebelling. There's a whole lot more to it, which we'll get into now. And I'm really, really quickly going to share with you a bit of what that story is, because it's important to the rest of it. So what Sam's book does is uncover the secret history of piracy. It specifically focuses on the golden age of piracy, period of history from about 1700s onwards. And we are brought up with this idea of pirates being these cartoonish villains, these kind of tyrannous, bloodthirsty, evil tyrants. Truth, of course, is always a lot more nuanced than that. Pirates were actually originally just kind of young professionals. They were sailors in the Navy. In the 1700s, well, around that time, Britain was at the helm of an empire, the slave trade was in full swing, and the Royal Navy was the biggest employer. But it was pretty brutal to be a sailor. 40% of sailors died on all the voyages. So understandably, no one was particularly keen to sign up, which kind of changes why people became pirates. It was really about a bid for freedom. It was taking a risk and deciding that existing outside of the establishment, outside of the law, was actually a better existence than being within it. And that's what kind of fueled the early pirates. That was their motivation. It was like a kind of fingers up to the establishment. But being a pirate came with its own challenges, of course, because you were suddenly with this bunch of strangers out on the sea, forming your own crew, and they had to figure out a way of living and working together in harmony, but also avoiding all the experiences and mistakes that they'd felt in the Navy, with all the kind of like brutality they'd experienced from Navy captains or on merchant ships. And this is where the story gets really interesting, because pirates really innovated. They, first of all, they kind of created a zero barrier to entry. Pirate ships were really diverse. Anyone could sign up. It didn't matter where you came from, just it mattered, whether you had necessary skills they needed. So you saw female pirates, not very many, but some. And they also, in the latter part of the golden age of piracy, would regularly free slaves and bring them on board. They had equal say. So pirate crews were really, really democratic. Everybody got a say on all the decisions that were made on board. They shared power between the leadership. Captain and the quartermaster were like a form of dual governance. So they would hold each other accountable and protect the crew. And this was, again, to kind of avoid conflict and avoid the kind of abuse of power they'd seen in the Navy. They gave everybody equal pay too. So everyone knew what everyone was getting. It was transparent. And the captain and the quartermaster would typically only get 2 to 4 times more than the average crew member. They also had social insurance. So if you lost a leg or an eye in battle, you would actually get compensation instead of what you would experience in the Navy, which is basically you were just left for dead. Everybody was expendable, whereas on a pirate crew, you weren't. And this was strategic. It was about conserving their resources. They had genuine and real cooperation and collaboration, not just amongst the crew, but amongst other pirate ships. And this, I think, really busts the myth about pirates being these kind of like havoc wreakers who are all out to get everybody. They weren't. They were strategic and collaborative. If they needed to fight a big battle to win a strategic goal, they would work together. And then they would scale back down to retain their independence and autonomy, which is a really effective way of working and quite different to actually how we organize ourselves today. They also had amazing branding and storytelling. Pirates were masters at PR. In fact, they used it to protect their bottom line again. So the Jolly Roger is arguably the world's first brand. If you saw the skull and crossbones on the horizon, you would know to keep well back. It drove fear into the heart of their enemies so that they could get into conflict less, which meant that pirates were often the least violent people on the sea at the time. Not to say that they weren't violent. I won't evade that. They were when they were, but they did try to avoid it if possible. And finally, pirates even had same-sex marriage, of equality and progressiveness that I think is pretty astounding for the time, which I hope will convince you that basically pirates weren't troublemakers, they were innovators. All of this stuff is now seen as kind of the hallmarks of progressive society. So pirates were really ahead of the game. And the key thing, and the first thing I want to say about how to be more pirate, the key thing that kind of glued them together was this idea of a pirate code. That was what enabled them to understand how to live and work together. It created trust, transparency, accountability, and cooperation. So the first thing anyone should think about doing is creating a pirate code. And this is really different to creating kind of organizational values or brand values, which tend to be kind of put on a piece of paper and then shoved in a drawer for a year. This is like a living blueprint of your culture. It's about being very deliberate about who you are, expressing your identity as an organization or even as an individual. So it's like, what do you believe in? What will you fight for? What really matters to you? And also, crucially, pirate codes work best when they're a mix of both principles and behaviors. We've been sent, well, not hundreds, lots and lots of pirate codes over the last couple of years of people kind of writing their own. Here's a couple, give you a flavor. And yeah, they tend to be a mix of principles and behaviors. And what I find that another thing that helps them to work really, really well is if they have some real opinion in them. So you want to differentiate yourself. You want to figure out how you are different to everybody else in your sector. If it doesn't have teeth, it probably isn't doing its job. It's also got to be emotive and inspiring to your team. It's all about looking at it and going, yeah, this is who I am, and this is going to help me change the world. And on a practical level, it should help you make decisions. So it's, yeah, intended to also be kind of practical too. The one on the left is from a company called Tradecraft, who are amazing pioneers of fair trade in the UK in the 1980s. And on the right is a BDA, which is an arts agency. So that's my first thing, is create a pirate code. And no pirate code is the same. So I can't tell you like, it should have 10 principles. It's, as I said, it's an expression of your identity. So when you've got your code, which is basically a compass to help you navigate uncertain, uncharted waters, that's when you can go exploring. So second thing is to go exploring, like get off the edges of the map, get into the unfamiliar, unexplored territory. And I think I get very frustrated with the word innovation. I think people overly associate it with technology, when actually innovation should always connotate discovery. And that's what the pirates knew, that you have to go into the kind of uncomfortable darkness at the edges of the map and feel a bit of discomfort. And that's where you really find new things. So I've got one example to share with you very quickly, which is a charity that I worked with last year, Macmillan, which I'm sure many of you will be familiar with, who aren't the most likely pirates, which I think is why it's a good example. They realized that one of the taboo subjects that's really kind of like at the edges for them was sex after cancer. Nobody was talking about it. None of their clinicians or nurses were trained to talk about it. And so one day, one of the women in their community raised it and said, I really think we need to talk about this. So they hosted a sex and cancer workshop inside a sex shop with the experts. And it was a really, really powerful experience. It kind of opened up a whole load of doors for the community, helped them to serve their people better, and was really educational for everyone as well. And it was something that just wasn't touched on at all. So exploring the taboos, figuring out who and where you could go to give you a totally different perspective is so important. But one hack that Sam and I have realized is really good for getting off the edges of the map is just getting good at asking difficult, uncomfortable questions. It's a skill, it's a practice, and piracy, I think, should be practiced. I think it gives you the advantage in two ways. The more you do it, the better you get at it. And you will be then the person in the meeting voicing the thing that everybody else is thinking, but no one is saying. Because we have been continually surprised at the lack of honesty in workplaces. Second thing is, it's actually a really good tool to build that all-important trust. The more vulnerable and the more open you are, the better you get, the stronger your team or your crew will be. So get good at coming up with uncomfortable questions and asking them. It might be this small stuff at the beginning, like, is this budget realistic? Or it might be bigger stuff like, let's tackle institutional racism. And one of the reasons that I'm really, really kind of passionate about this subject is because when I was doing more research on Be More Pirate as the year went on, I came across this term called intelligent disobedience. And it comes from guide dogs, and it's all about challenge culture, really. So the reason it comes from guide dogs is that it's when you train a guide dog, you first have to train them to be obedient. Like, this is critical for all pet training, I'm sure everyone knows. It has to be able to listen to and take instructions from its human, but it also has to, in the second stage of training, learn when to be disobedient. A guide dog really has to listen to its own instincts in order to figure out how to keep the human safe. And I think that's really interesting because humans never get taught that kind of thing. From the second we get into school, we're pretty much taught to obey figures of authority. And although some of us obviously work it out that you shouldn't obey all figures of authority, it's very deeply conditioned within us. And what the research on intelligent disobedience shows, and there's a whole book on it by a behavioral scientist called Ira Shalef, which I think is really valuable and would recommend anyone read, is that he shows that in high-risk environments, particularly like medicine and the military, a challenge culture is what keeps people safer. So this idea that, rule breakers are always the troublemakers is actually fundamentally scientifically untrue. They are the people who will get the better outcomes in the long run. So yeah, if you can foster a culture of challenge, asking difficult questions, you will gain a strategic advantage. The next thing that's super important is the importance, I guess, of action. One thing Sam always says to me is talk minus action equals shit. There's too much talk and too little action, and that's why we are in the situation we are in, where there's some really big challenges on the horizon, and we're kind of holding conferences and not moving fast enough. So this really came from when we started asking people, what rule do you want to break? And they would say usually huge things like, I want to eradicate single-use plastic from my organization, which is a great ambition to have, but just doesn't work because most people are fundamentally overwhelmed already and they're already doing too much. Particularly entrepreneurs, I'd imagine, trying to take on too much is classic. So we said, rather than sitting down with your team and figuring out, a whole plan or a big unwieldy kind of ambition, figure out if everyone in your team can take a small but bold action that will actually move the needle on that big ambition. Break it down. By small, we mean logistically simple to do. You could carry it out in the next week. Bold, as in it's a nice mix of like fear and excitement. So you want to feel that it's going to do something. And ideally repeatable, so that it becomes a sort of new rule rather than just a one-off. And I just add to that quite often the most important first step for small, bold actions is to actually, rather than starting to do something new, to stop doing something. I'd ask everybody here, like, what do you actually need to stop doing? This is a question I repeatedly go back to myself because I'm really bad at it. And it's mingled in with a lot of guilt and shame and a sense of trying to always be very productive and taking on too much. And I suspect, again, a lot of entrepreneurs do this, very used to being very self-sufficient, but actually the most effective thing you can often do is to let go of stuff. One team that did this really well were Birdseye, one of the earliest workshops we did, where they created almost all their new rules were to do with letting things go. 1 in, 1 out rule, which was giving people permission to say no to new pieces of work if people already had too much. Meeting-free Mondays, which speaks for itself. And a be here now rule, which was no mobile phones in meetings because the distraction was unproductive. So that's almost all the things, a brief run through of how to be more pirate, but there's kind of one last thing I want to just finish on. As Sam and I kind of started to talk about what we meant by rule breaking, we came up with a new definition, which is that rule breaking is one of the few levers of change left, no longer the risky thing to do, it is the responsible thing to do. And I think I kind of covered off why I think it's the responsible thing to do. And the reason I think it's one of the levers of change that is left is because I don't think that the levers of change that we have, things like protest and petitions and charity, are doing enough. And I think we need to give more power to the people who are close to the problems that we can solve, and help them to feel that they have the permission to do that. But this is the hardest part. Pirate rebellions are more about behavior and human beings than anything else. What pirates pioneered was ways of working together that were more effective. But the problem is that the real rebellion that needs to happen is the inner one. The inner rebellion is pretty much the first thing you should be working on, and also the hardest. And that's because it's the rules that are internalized that are harder to break down, because it's very hard for us to sort, what is authentic to us and what is something that we have been conditioned to believe or think or do. And, I even think, across this year, I reflect on how much I believe, or not even believe, but how much I attribute my value to working really, really hard even when that hard work has become unproductive or ineffective, there's something about the reward system that I've grown up with around hard work that makes me feel that that's what I should be doing. And it's been a process of kind of breaking that down and really holding it up to the light and examining it. So that's the kind of the biggest challenge of it all. But it's easier if you do it with people, other people. If you've got 2 or 3 people who share your frustrations, who want to do the same thing, want to make the same changes, find your crew. 100% the best thing you can do. Okay, I think I'm I'm going to stop. And this is my email address if anyone would like to know more after this session or find out more about Be More Pirate. Okay.
That was great. Alex, thank you so much. I took lots of notes, and a couple that's particularly kind of stayed with me was create the pirate code, kind of write down how you want to act and kind of project that out, because that'll feed into daily things and allow better things to happen. The intelligent disobedience, 2 very big words, but make a lot of sense together. Really, really enjoyed that. And the small but bold actions. I think you were spot on with that point, as in people sometimes think there's of the too big a problem and it's such a big thing to tackle. Why not start small, get some momentum, do it if you're in a big company or you want to make these changes, do it with a couple of colleagues, as you say, and just over time you build momentum, you get more buy-in from people when they see the success of the small bold actions, and then who knows what will happen. So yeah, thank you very much. Love that. And for everybody listening, do pop in lots of questions, because I'm sure you're digesting it, the talk that was just gone through, and we'll be sure to answer them in the Q&A. I should say as well that, Alex, there are a couple of books, Be More Pirate and How to Be More Pirate, and there's a 3rd one on the way by the sounds of it. So be sure to check that out and to follow at Be More Pirate on Instagram to see all the good stuff that they're doing. Is there anything else you'd like to mention, Alex, before I have a chat with Ben?
I think that I will stop talking and allow Ben some airtime, and then maybe we'll come back to whatever in the questions later.
Sure, yeah. Great, thank you. Is Ben still with us? I'm summoning the spirit.
Oh, it's just reading this book.
Nice.
It's great. I love. That was just like music to my ears. You know when you know a bunch of truths, right, and you try and live them out, and then you just get a reminder, a big, clear, like bold reminder of what it is you care about, what you actually know, what you try and put into practice. But the great thing is you just have to keep learning those lessons, as you were just explaining, Alex. And it's good. I've got so many pages folded down in this book compared to others. So piracy is responsibility. That's my favorite new reframe that I'm going to take away.
So I'm not sure. So for the format for this, I guess I've 7 or 8 questions, Ben. I think we'll blast through them.
Let's sing it. Let's sing it to each other.
Like. Let's see what happens.
We do it in an operatic style.
Yes. And we're having background top trumps is happening at the moment as well. We spent all day sorting our shelves out. Okay, so the first question that I have, and we'll go, as the questions go on, you'll find out a lot more about Ben and all the good stuff that he's done. But from what I've seen, and I've known Ben for a while, I'm part of the book club, Rebel Book Club, that we'll talk about, which has been great. But from very early on in his career, he's always focused on supporting other people. He was in an organization called Mad Venturer, Career Break Cafe, Right to Dream. He supported entrepreneurs in Richard Branson's Virgin Startup. He's worked in Escape the City, helping people trying to make a big career change. And my question on this is, like, how come since very early on you've always wanted to support and empower other people? Where did that stem from? And how does it feel to kind of do that on a day-to-day basis?
You've thrown this very altruistic lens over me, Sam. The honest answer to that question, you know, taking on Alex's challenge to being more honest as well as more pirate, is that it's selfish. I enjoy it. I get a buzz.
Feels good.
It feels good. And so that's always the lesson of, like, you know, if you serve, if you support, if you empower, if you can connect with people and make their lives a little better, then it rubs off on you. Like the chemicals in our body like that. So that's the first thing. And I think it also goes like a little bit for me around the teaching. I think in another life I would have enjoyed to go down the teaching path. I have huge respect for teachers, and in fact in a lot of our work we end up being teachers anyway, in lots of different ways, coaching and mentoring, and with the teams that we build and so on. So yeah, so it's kind of like it feels good, and it's sort of what I'm always drawn to. It's like, how could I help? I'm having to learn to be better to say, focus on this is what I really need to do now. I need to edit those 10 web pages, not go and get drawn into a conversation about piracy and you know what we should do next with the world. Yes, here we are.
And a new project. What, like, from that, what gave you the confidence to start your own thing? Because I think the first couple of places you were, they had a good positive social impact, and you kind of went in and helped run them or managed them or did operations. But then you kind of jumped into Tribe Wanted, which sounds like a very interesting story. But what kind of gave you the confidence to make that leap to go, yeah, I'm going to set up my own thing?
I think for me, it was reflecting back, and this is 15 plus years now ago. It's the magic triangle of a healthy wanderlust and curiosity for the world, which comes from partly from within and partly from having various mentors and good teachers along the way. But that was I was just like, what's out there? I want to learn. I'm hungry. I'm curious, especially around travel and new places. The other big factor is privilege, which I've only really recognized, like many people do further down the line. But I was in a really fortunate position to have this wonderful education and to be in this position just to be able to have a choice about what I was going to do with my time. And the third thing is kind of naivety. I think I remember being in a queue in one of those university like beer and pizza nights with a corporate, and they're all going, listen, this is a great graduate scheme, have free beer and pizza, and then come and apply for it. I remember saying to my friends who were studying Middle Eastern studies and philosophy and politics and anthropology, and I was like, hold on a second, this is nothing to do with what we're spending our days exploring or doing, or the charities we're fundraising for. And they're like, no, this is what we do now. We're lucky. We have to just apply for these jobs and get on with it. I don't want to market tampons and Pringles. I want to do something. I want to go and have adventures. And so there was a naivety there. There was an idealism there, which if you haven't got when you're 21, when are you ever going to have it? So that those three things combined, I think, for me to say, sod this, I'm going to go off. And I wasn't particularly radical. It didn't feel radical, but I'm not going to go down that path of trying to get a well-paid graduate job. And I went off traveling, and that led to everything else. Wow.
And what, out of it, just for people listening, because I know a bit about Tribe Wanted, but what exactly was it, and how did that come about? Because I get the impression that it just came out of nowhere. You like to look of it and just went for it. Am I right in saying that? And kind of how did it evolve?
Yeah, like all good stories around the campfire, it sort of came out of nowhere. But the reality of it was, now I don't know how old the people in this on the Zoom are on this pirate ship are tonight, but this might be a challenge to their age. So there was this thing called MySpace, right? MySpace was set up by a guy called Tom, and when you joined MySpace, this was like the original, not the original, but one of the early social networks. It was called social networks rather than social media. And you went on MySpace, and it was all based around music. So there were bands that would form fan pages, and like the Bookshelf has a Instagram page now, but back then it was really artists that had it, musicians. And so there was a band on MySpace called the Arctic Monkeys that they built a fan base on there first, and then they'd gone to #1 all over the world. Like they were the most successful new band in the UK since the Beatles. And everyone was like, is their music as good as the Beatles? And it was like, the jury was out a little bit. But the reason why they were so successful was because they built this fan base online. And then when they went out to sell their music, there were a lot of fans. And that's the model now. But in 2004, that was new.
Yeah.
This guy got in touch with me on something called MSN Messenger, which was like the original chat function. And I was writing a blog. So I was trying to put something out there. My blog was all about travel and helping people who are older than 18 to 25 go traveling, take career breaks, do something different. And I was like trying to help them out. And I was trying to sell banner ads. There's awful like ads that used to go down the side of a web page. Yeah. I mean, there's still someone that's out there still selling them, because you see them on news sites. They're horrible things, aren't they? And I was like, oh, I like the content, but I'm not enjoying the business model of this. This is a slog. And this guy messaged me and said, hey, Ben, I like your blog. Have you seen what's going on MySpace with the Arctic monkeys? I'm like, you got the wrong guy. I'm in the kind of travel space here.
Yeah.
He said, no. What if you could take a MySpace type social network and instead of the band, instead of the Arctic monkeys, you had a place somewhere in the world and you build a community around it online. And then that went to that. I was like, whoa, this is trippy. But I was up all night messaging away with this guy in Manchester who I didn't know. We ended up meeting 2 weeks later. And this is the bit of that Alex is talking about, the action. Like, how do you go from whoa, this is a cool idea, we're bouncing back and forth, to, well, what if this could happen? I was like, I'm going to get on the train and come and meet you, because if we're going to explore this idea, we have to see if we can do it together. And he and I were very different backgrounds and so on. But the idea that we were developing together was like the fire, the chemistry. And so we kind of, that drew us together. And then this idea of what became Tribe Wanted came out of it. So we were like, if we were going to build an online social network connected to a real space in the world that they would somehow maybe go and visit at some point, and where would that be? I was like, well, it's got to be somewhere really remote and different to an online space. So what about, a desert island? And I was working community tourism, so I had an idea of that model, and through my travels. And so I said, I think this could work. We just need to find the island. So I started Googling islands, which you can still do. I mean, it's a kind of
Richard Branson style.
Yeah, I mean, he got his first island for next to nothing, and that was the start of his story. I think I'd be a slightly different path to him. Not quite as well known, but yeah. So it was an island story, and we found this place in Fiji, northern Fiji, very remote. Wow. And it turned out the local community wanted to start a community tourism project. It had actually been prophesized by the local gardener that one day the world would come to Vorovoro Island, this beautiful 200-acre island in the South Pacific. And so when I turned up, because then I went, and I was like, I found this place, and I got on the plane and went, and I said to the 65-year-old Fijian island chief, I was trying to explain the idea of like getting a group of people together online to sort of fundraise and support the development of this project and come and visit it. And he's like, oh yes, we've heard of you before. Like, we were told the world would come one day. I was like, okay. I was a 25-year-old with a backpack, and he trusted us, and he said, give it a go. If you can raise the funds, let's do it. So then we launched Tribe Wanted, which was like a 3-page website with a PayPal button that said, if you want to join this online real island adventure, it's £120, and you can have a week on the island sometime in the next 3 years. I mean, I did some like a basic Excel spreadsheet on it, but I had no idea. And we put it live, and managed to get into the Metro newspaper, mentioned there, and then it just spread. And we had almost 3,000 people sign up in a few months. Wow. And yeah, and raised a lot of funds, and went and lived on the island. And that's when the problem started. But yes, it was so that was my first startup adventure. And it was too much right at once, but it was like doing an MBA and much more all at once. I learned a lot.
Yeah, and I guess just following the idea and the energy from it, and kind of partnering up with someone, look how far it went in a relatively short space of time. That's incredible to kind of, and you don't know all the answers when you start a journey like that, but you can kind of try and figure them out, or it's amazing the kind of doors you can unlock.
Yeah, and if you're 21 now, 22, I don't know, and like you haven't really had to go at building a social enterprise, starting a business, creating a campaign, writing a book, whatever these things are that you're kind of excited about potentially doing, you have some real advantages. One is one of the main things, other than your time and your energy and your creativity and all of that, is that you don't know. You haven't been through certain things. So there's a lack of fear there. You see this in sport and with creativity and art and so on. And so there's this sort of intensity that can come with that. And I could not do that project now. If I did, I would do it differently, but it would not potentially have taken off in the same way. Yeah. So certain things can only happen at certain times. And so that's why I love that moment in life, that kind of chance to just like, I can throw stuff out there and see what happens. But then it requires commitment and responsibility as soon as you accept your pirate challenge.
Yes, which brings us on nicely, I guess, to Rebel Book Club, as in that was the next big challenge after Try Wanted. I think everyone would be interested to hear just how did that come about, and what is it, and how's it going?
Yeah, it's so funny because it feels, when I jump from like the Fijian island adventure, which was this big physical, I lived on a desert island for 5 years, 3,000 people visited. We replicated the project in Sierra Leone in West Africa, and Umbria in Italy, and Papua New Guinea and Bali. And it was this really exciting social enterprise, and we did loads of great things with it. It wasn't a successful business, and I'm still paying off a little bit of debt from that project. So, there was a hangover from it, but I do not regret the positive impact it had, the lessons we had, and the memories that we've gained from it. It was a real privilege to do. But yeah, then I went back into, okay, I'm going to take some of those lessons and try and help other people, and I'm going to just have a breather from the crazy startup adventure. So I worked with organizations, as you mentioned, like Escape the City, helping people who are unfulfilled a bit further down the career path to get into exciting, new, impactful careers. And then Rebel Book Club came about out of nowhere, in the sense that I wasn't planning to start a new business. And I remember, again, I was traveling, something I've forgotten how to do almost in the last year or two. But I was chatting with we did this like session. Actually, this is a really cool creative idea game that you can do. You can do it online. Even better if you can get a group of friends together. But basically you go around and everyone shares an idea. Wouldn't it be great what about if we tried this? And you do, everyone comes with a couple of thoughts.
Yeah.
So you're like, here's my idea. And someone's taking notes. I'm going to do all of these now. Yeah. So someone's capturing all of this, and you do a once round. Then you have a drink, a bite to eat. This is like my dream dinner party, basically. And you go around again. And of course, by the time you're on the third or fourth round of ideas, people are making up stuff, but they're also more relaxed, maybe had a couple of drinks, whatever, and some really cool stuff. And then the next morning, the person who's captured it all sends it back around, like idea and name.
Nice.
And one of the ideas that I read through the next morning was, I'm really struggling to finish books, but I love nonfiction. I wonder if other people feel the same. And I was like, that's me. I've got, and anyway, so we're both Ben, we met up, compared our Kindles. Yes, we have this same affliction, which the Japanese have a word for. It's called sonduku, which means literally the growing pile of unread books on your bedside table or on your Kindle or wherever. So, yeah, we're like many people have done before. We said, let's start a book club, but we'll focus on nonfiction, and we'll have a meetup and design a cocktail around the theme of the book, and be a bit sort of boot camp around reading. Like, let's get through this together. And it was great. And then we came back to London and we're like, let's do that again. I said, I'm busy and you're busy. And okay, let's make ourselves accountable. And this is a key lesson, because Rebel Book Club doesn't, compared to the Island Adventure and the rest of it, doesn't sound that, not, I don't like using this word like Alex, innovative, but different in some ways other than the name. But what we got right early was, we said, to make it us accountable to the people that join and them to the club, we'll charge a fee. And so it's £15, which was like twice the value of a paperback book. And we'll include a book voucher, and we'll organize a meetup. And we had the first ever meetup, May 2015, on the rooftop of where I used to work at Virgin Startup.
I remember. I wasn't invited, but I remember it was on.
The invite, I'm sorry about that, Sam. And we drank rum on a spring evening on top of the Virgin head office. So a nice connection to Branson again, but it wasn't the island. It was in Paddington, London. Anyway, and we started Rebel Book Club. 15 people were there. And this was a big lesson. It's like, it was the lack of ambition in that project that is the reason why I think it's succeeding now. It was trying, like Alex was saying, it's that lesson about doing small things boldly. So we were like, one book, one really good meetup, one great cocktail, really cool crowd, take our lessons from it, try and apply it. And we've done that 70 months in a row now.
Wow.
And we're not a huge organization, as you know. We've ramped it up in the last 2 years. I've gone full time on it, but for 4 years it was a side project, but it was sustainable financially from the start. It's always been fun, whereas Tribe Wanted and other projects I've been in have been the levels of stress have been intense as well. At the highs, there's also been extreme lows. With Rebel Book Club has always been fun. It's getting more serious now. And so it's just one of those things where you think, we're having, and yet you think, oh, is it really having a huge, like, world-changing impact? And it's funny, it's lack of ambition. Like, we want to help people improve their reading habit and connect, is one of the reasons it's succeeding, I think, at least for our core community. And there's a social going on another, not Zoom, we don't use Zoom, on the Icebreaker channel right now, which I'll jump to after this, with 150 people from around the world just sharing. But these connections and the lessons we're learning through the books, like Be More Pirate and others, are really having quite a big impact, and we're starting to do really interesting projects around it. Now we've got a bit of scale. So yeah, so it wasn't the thing that I was expecting to be working on full time. Now, you know, I'm in that stage of life with family and mortgage and the rest of it, but it's working, and it's not the only thing I do, but it is my main focus, and I feel really grateful to be working on it.
Nice. And I have one question on that, and I'll go to the audience Q&A after. So if you have questions, do ask them, please. And there's about a million more questions that I'd love to ask Ben, but I'll stick it to one more. Is how I think a lot of people struggle with, they want to set up their own business potentially, and there obviously is the option of joining another startup or social enterprise, or joining another movement and kind of helping and empowering somebody that's set it up originally. But if for somebody that's really kind of stubborn and wants to set something up, they often struggle with knowing that the idea is the one. As in, they might have 100 ideas, they might have written loads down. Like, what trigger was there with Rebel Book Club, with you and Ben, to kind of, did something in particular happen to be like, I'm going to spend the next 3 years, 4 years, which you've done now, on it? Or did you just got taken on the journey and you never even thought about it any more than that? You just had things to do that week, things to do the next month, and you just kept doing them. Like, how, a bit of a rambling question.
No, great question. So Rebel Book Club for me is almost like marrying the girl that you were mates with from school. So she's always been there. She's always been your friend. You've always been friends. You stayed in contact, and then you realize at some point, oh, it's you. You were always there. So I think the dating romance analogy is really strong for kind of starting up and ideas, especially. So first of all, don't get married on your first date. So whether it's a co-founder or an idea, don't overcommit. So it's like, if you and I were generating ideas right now, which would be easy to do with your creative skills and curiosities, like the risk is you go, right, what's the plan for the next 6 months, a year? You know, the world doesn't.
Equity do, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. The world doesn't even know what's happening next week, let alone us. Like the plan, there is chaos out there, and so the key is following your curiosities. I love the analogy we used to talk about the escape school, which is like when you throw a ball, a dog chases a ball without thinking, and so that's the serotonin surging in the dog's system. So like, what are the curiosities that you have that kind of positively distract you, not just pure hedonism, not just escapism, but like positive distraction, like problems that keep coming back, like this really bothers me, or this really excites me, or like when I'm in the shower, it's like it's always there. So there's that's what you would call passion, but I like thinking more about it's a positive distraction. Like, what is that? What is that thing? And they're not obviously always right in front of you. Sometimes they're slow hunches. Sometimes they're just like bubbling away. And of course, it merges with trends that might be going on, stories you're reading, things you're seeing out there as well. So don't get married to your first idea. Be positively distracted. It's not necessarily the thing standing in front of you. And then work out which one is going to best fit your criteria for your resources. So it's like, how much time I have, how easy is it to start? That's kind of a key one. Tribe Wanted was not easy to start. It was a lot of fun, great adventure. Not easy to start, but it was the right time for us to do that project. And then sort of, does it really, like, have we got the skills and everything to do this? Those are less important because you can learn all that stuff. And then when it comes to money, this is the big lesson on money, is like, design a business model to start it, but not necessarily the thing that's going to like be the business model in the future. Like, so what could we do today that could start generating revenue, sell some merchandise, host a paid event online, like I don't know, do something creative on social channels, you know, influencer marketing, whatever it is. So so figure out a business model, but don't think this has to be it. Again, like, you're not getting married to the business model.
So kind of almost be open a little bit for maybe the first 6 months and just listen, see what people that are involved in, welcome ideas.
And don't put pressure on it. Like this, something we do, especially if we really care about a problem we want to solve, or we've been thinking about it for a long time, is we put a lot of our hopes and dreams and aspirations and everything onto this thing which doesn't exist, this idea. Like it doesn't, oh, I've got a great idea. And people don't even want to share them. It's bollocks. You've got to share as much as you can so you can hear. And when you're trying to, so don't put pressure on it. Oh, I'm just doing this thing. Call it an experiment, call it a project.
That's a good word.
Trying this thing. And then when it's out there, when you're starting to share it, when you're trying to get feedback, don't listen to people who are going to lie to you. And the people who are going to lie to you are the people that love you. So they're either going to say, or they're close to you, they're either going to say, Sam, this is the best thing this is the best thing ever. You're going to be amazing.
I'm so proud of you.
Yeah, because I care about your success and your well-being. Like I know that this is something that's important to you. Or I'm going to go, Sam, are you sure you want to quit that well-paid job too? Or like commit to do this or announce this thing? You've got a good reputation on TikTok. You don't want to trash it with this crazy idea. So ignore these people, take their love, but ignore their feedback. The feedback that matters are the people who you might be able to help with this solution or idea that you've got. And when you speak to those people, final point, and I'll shut up. When you speak to those people, ask them about their past behavior. Not, hey, Sam, I've got this idea for this book club. What do you think? Because you're going to go, that's cool. But there's no risk taken on your side for giving me that opinion. Oh, would you pay 15? Yeah, probably I'd pay that. Yeah. And then 2 months later, I come back. Hey, Sam, I made it. Where's your £15? No, it's all right. Like no risk on your side, all the risk on my side. So the tip is to say, hey, Sam, what was the last nonfiction book you read? How did it go? Did you get to the end? How much do you spend on books each month? Where do you buy them from? Who do you read your books with? Which book changed your life? Boom, boom, boom. Data, information. And I'm getting you to talk about yourself. All right, trust being built. So ask people about their past behavior. You'll build trust, you'll get insights, and you'll have future customers.
Nice. Love that. Alex, I'd love to welcome you back to the stage, the virtual stage. I'll run through a few questions, but yeah, that makes a lot of sense. The first question here, which is for you, Alex, is what advice would you have for somebody working in a large charity or social enterprise that just isn't particularly progressive? And I know you kind of touched on earlier about to take small steps and build the team. Is there any more tips on top of that to kind of, because it is almost trying to change a mindset in a lot of cases?
Yeah, it's funny because I've been in one. I did nothing when I was there because it's really super hard. But I think that the reason I didn't do it was because, well, there was two reasons, I'd say. First, I really felt that I was on my own. So again, this thing about finding the other people. There are other people around you who are thinking the same thing. I'm astounded that the problems are the same in most places, and that most people are thinking, we don't really, like, it's classic, like we should have less silos. We don't need as much hierarchy, and I should caveat that by saying, flat structures don't seem to work. Entirely flat structures don't work either. You do need roles and responsibilities, and you do need leadership, but those need to have better checks and balances than we have in most places. So I'm back. Poor communication is everywhere. So there's no doubt that people are thinking, and there are lots of small interventions that could be taken, but you need to sort of find those people and start to form real, trusting relationships with them. I've seen that that's worked in quite a few places. As a way, and that's what I would have done in hindsight. I think the problem is when you've got the daily grind on yourself that that can feel very wearing. So certainly sort of setting personal boundaries as well. I wish I'd set more boundaries about what was okay for me to do and what wasn't. I didn't really know that I had to, and I think again this comes back to the examining some of the norms that you have just internalized. I realized in hindsight that I was actually very depleted from my job. And so I didn't really have the energy to fight, I suppose. So finding how I could sort of refuel myself in some way was going to be the most critical thing. You can't fight a rebellion without, energy and resource. And I think, I'd also say that piracy isn't always about being the outspoken person. That's a bit of a misnomer. Some people always think you have to be the person in the room challenging, but you don't. Piracy is really a really key thing, is about building relationships. There's one woman called Sarah Sheed in our wider pirate crew who leads an arts crew of 1,000 people who are all trying to be pirate and challenge the arts sector. And she said to me, 90% of time pirates weren't in battle, which they're doing all the other stuff. They're like scrubbing the decks and mending the sails and stuff. So all of that stuff is really important. It's like protecting your own people.
Yeah.
So, find your allies. They don't even have to be in your team, but find those people in your sector who are also sharing it. And, there's so much stuff on social media now that I didn't even think to look for at the time.
Yeah, no, that's really good advice. And I think there's, as you said about the kind of behind the scenes stuff, I think that's really important. For example, going into a meeting, you can find the allies before, mention, I'm going to broach this idea, which I think will be really good. It'll have a social impact or an environmental impact. When I mention it, can you back me up? And get a kind of a group of people, and then the meeting happens, and then all of a sudden a little bit of groupthink. I guess if 3 people say it out of 7, they'll go, okay, yeah, that's a good thing to do. Let's kind of do it. So it's kind of doing the prep work, I think, can help a lot. But sorry, go ahead.
No, that's absolutely true. I was just going to add that actually happened in one of the crews. And what I find when people kind of really get inspired by pirates, they go, right, we're going to challenge more, but not recognizing that your first step isn't to then like just leap into the challenge and be like putting your hand up in the first meeting. It's the first step is to practice, to get your sounding board, to go, if I write the email like this, how does this come across? And then get people to reflect on it or verbalize it. I'm really, really interested actually in developing people's like oral communication skills, just personally, because it's such a big part, I think, of being a good challenger, activist, and advocate in all spaces. And it's not something you get taught at school very much. I don't think it's something very widely practiced in organizational training either. And I think particularly, probably speak for women, that it's not something we always feel very confident about, or will quite easily back down if we feel we're not being agreeable, or just are not quite as confident. So having that sounding board is good.
Yes, no, I like that. Anything to add on that one, Ben, or will I move on to the next question?
No, go for it. I can't answer that. That was great.
Cool. I'm conscious of time. I know we need to wrap up soon. So I have a question here from a 24-year-old student from Leeds. How do you find your inner voice and courage to choose entrepreneurial adventures, especially when it seems riskier than getting, he says, dull job that's risk-free, but I guess it depends how you look at risk. But yeah, how do you follow that entrepreneurial spirit? I guess to you, Ben, if you want to.
Yeah, I think it depends on. So I talked about how I was lucky. I like that magic triangle, which pushed me out there. So it's finding the things that you are drawn to and spending more time on them. So that can be people, like you're here tonight, right? This is part of that journey. You're actioning it right now by being here. The next thing is like, what do you do with that information? What do you do with the ideas and the lessons that you've just learned? Who do you reach out to? So one of the things I think is really fun to do is take long shots. So if you could have anyone in the world on your team, or like supporting your idea or backing you, or basically like supporting you on your mission, who would it be? Like dream big. So I asked this to our Rebel Book Club members recently. I said, if we could have one author come and hang out with us for an evening, who would it be? So we had like Barack and Michelle Obama, the Dalai Lama, Brené Brown, all the A-listers, right? Cool, let's try and get them. And then like we're down the track with like, working with great authors, but that's still a big step for us because we don't have a budget of 200 grand to hire an author. But like those long shots are possible. You've got to just start sending that note, finding out what that person is doing, and seeing if you can join in with their conversation, saying, hey, I've got a dream, I want to do something, I'm trying to make something happen. And you'll be surprised how many people do want to help. So put yourself in situations where you're going to join a conversation like this, reach out to people. And then it's that old rule of the 5 people you spend the most time with are likely to rub off on you the most. Like the pirate team crew gif that Alex shared at the end. It's perfect, like who your crewmates. So they're not necessarily you're working with, but who you're spending time with. And that's, I think, difficult, because if your close social network, and we're talking about people you spend the majority of your time with. You can't choose family, but you can just about choose most other people. So yeah, go and spend more time with them. And then the final thing I would say is you can have a dull job and launch a pirate adventure or launch an entrepreneurial adventure. Like, there are plenty of people doing it, and it's actually the way to take a lot of the financial risk out of it. Is to build up a rainy day fund or a startup fund or whatever, and for a lot of people that's the only way you can do it, and that's also a great test of how much do you care.
Nice. Alex, you burning to add something to that?
It's just there's so much in your story, Ben, that is like has so many parallels with what I've gone through. Escape the City has been such a big like influence and important like player in my career journey. Started off really at the beginning. You're so right about like paying attention to this talk tonight is like a part of your journey. I remember going to a talk with Matt Trinetti like 10 years ago where he was talking about his trip around Iceland. I was like, maybe I could write a self-published book, and I wrote a really shit one. But some of the lines in it are like so close to what I've arrived at with Be More Pirate. I'm like, okay, it does come back full circle. Like those things don't go away. You just have to kind of refine it and do some stuff that fails and expect it to fail, and that's fine. And you come back to it. But the one practical thing I would also add, like in absolute truth to people listening tonight, how did I learn to listen to the inner voice properly? I was very, very deliberate, because I was at a real crossroads 2 or 3 years ago. And actually meditation was the thing. I sat down and I stopped, and I was much slower, and I found my intuition again. And I wrote down the word adventure. I was like, that's what I'm trying to get at. And it's not a job title, and it's not in a particular industry. It's not a thing. Like, it's conditions that I want in my life, and I've lost them. And so I kind of broke that down a bit more and was like, okay, excitement, serendipity, connection, learning. And then I found a way back to it. And I could identify the opportunities much more clearly when I knew what those conditions were. But I had to be quiet first, and there's too much noise.
Yeah, that's so important, especially now with social media and the news, all this kind of stuff, like just freeing yourself. And you always hear lots of stories of people just going to like a log cabin in the woods for a week, and they find themselves. That's just from just eliminating distractions, getting a pen and paper and writing things down. That's going to help setting up my own stuff as well. Was that is just writing down, what do I like doing? And it sounds like, yeah, that's going to happen to both of you as well. So anybody listening, if you're unsure what your passion is or your purpose, take time, get off your phone for a few hours, get a piece of paper and just write. And you'll be so surprised at what comes out, and like spend the time on it. Don't just go, I'm going to write for 5 minutes, sit with the pen and paper for an hour, a couple of hours, and just see what flows out, and keep asking the question why and what, and you'll kind of never know what comes. So I'm kind of going to start wrapping up now, I guess, because I know that the Rebel Book Clubbers at rebelbookclub.com. I haven't said the website, but be sure to check it out. It's the best book club in the world, as far as I'm concerned, and thousands of people are concerned. So please do check it out, and bemorepirate.com. I'm going to share the screen and just kind of wrap up. But if you have any closing words, Ben or Alex, go for it. This could change somebody's life, so no pressure.
After you, Alex.
I mean, there's so many things that you said that I like almost want to pick up on, but it's too much to go into now. I don't know if I've got any closing remarks other than what I just said. I think that was really my closing.
That's okay.
For you to like the inner, figure out that inner voice. And I think maybe I'll add that, those curiosities that Ben says, the stuff that's always been there, like the girlfriend or whatever you always had, like that doesn't go away. So I don't really, I think that every time I listen to other people and kind of gone down those secure job routes, it wasn't that it was a mistake, because it's all part of a journey, but it definitely, I end up coming back around to the same place in the end anyway.
Yeah.
So
So yeah, listen to your voice, trust your instinct, try and eliminate the noise a little bit.
Yeah.
I'm just going to add one thing to that, which is
Nice.
the medicine that works for me, which is follow good energy.
Mm.
And that could mean a multitude of things, but we are made of multitudes, each of us. So where do you fill up? Where does your tank get filled up? Is it like it's certain music at a certain time? It's a coffee at the right moment. Maybe it's something else, another kind of stimulant. It's a conversation like this. See, this is like Zoom fatigue is real, but I don't feel it right now because I'm in a conversation in a room with people who I'm excited about what they're doing, and I get the energy back. And that's even in a closed, like little, awkward internet space that we're all in at the moment, which is going to, by the way, I recommend if you want to hang out with people online, have creative conversations, Meebo Island, we've been doing it, which you can actually play a pirate. So it's more like a game. We've been doing that Rebel Book Club. An icebreaker video is really cool too, for a bit more. So when you're hosting events online, go and do something even more creative. So yeah, go where the good energy is, and it won't be there the whole time. I have my dips every day, but when I get the good energy, exciting things happen.
Love that. Great. Again, thank you so much for being involved. I found that hugely inspiring. I'm going to get the pen and paper out tomorrow, reassess my life again. But yeah, really appreciate you taking the time. I'm sure everybody in the audience really appreciated it. And who knows what social and environmental impact businesses are going to flow from the conversation tonight. And it's a great follow-up to last week's talk. I've put up a couple of Twitter handles here, and I apologize I didn't ask you, either of you, if this was okay, but I hope it is okay, just in case people have any questions or anything that we didn't get through tonight, to reach out to us on that and use the hashtag GEF2021. And if there's any questions or anything about Better Space, feel free to email me at sam@betterspace.london. And then there's a bunch more talks over the next 3 weeks. Next week's all about fundraising, and then social impact after that, or creating value and social impact after that. And then there's the Pitch for Good Awards, and we'll be hearing from lots of great social enterprises. So be sure to sign up and follow all the accounts at the bottom. Do I have anything else to say? I don't think so. So Alex, thanks again for coming along. We will be running a competition actually for a few copies of the Be More Pirate book, which we'll talk about over the next week or two. But as I said, be sure to sign up to the next events. And again, yeah, thank you all very much for listening. Oh, last thing I forgot to say, if you are a City student or alumni, be sure to check out City Ventures, and you can get access to lots of one-to-one support. They're also taking in the latest cohort of startups for the City Launch Lab. So check out the City Ventures section on LinkedIn or on Instagram to find out more. And also you can enter the Pitch for Good competition, and there's a prize pot of £2,000. So if there's any questions or anything, feel free to DM us or drop me an email at sam@betterspace.london. That is definitely the end, but thank you all very much and good night.